We've now got the skeleton of our app put together, and it's time to now produce a list of different libraries to display to the user. So just remember how this app is going to work. We want to have a list of libraries to show to the user, and then whenever a user taps one, we want to expand that particular library and show the user more detail about it. So we want to, somewhere we have to basically stash a list of libraries to show the user. We need that data to sit somewhere inside of our application. Now, in a previous app, in the first one we worked on, when we were working with that list of albums, I made the case to say, whenever you're making a mobile application, it a lot of the time makes sense to store data like that, data that you want to show to the user on a third-party server, like an actual API. And then whenever you want to make changes to the list of data that should be shown to the user, you just update the server, right? As opposed to having to update the app. In other words, don't hard code your data inside your application. That was the lesson to learn. For this app right here, just for the purposes of getting a really solid foundation in Redux, we're going to break that rule a little bit, and we're just going to say for this application, we're going to hard code a list of libraries inside our application. So like we will have a file in our project, right, somewhere in here, a file that says specifically, show this list of libraries to the user. So just to be clear, this is like kind of a one-off thing just to get a little bit stronger grasp on Redux. Okay, so in this section, I want to figure out how exactly we are going to produce that list and make it available to the rest of our application. So I'm kind of, what I'm talking about here is producing some amount of data that's going to sit in our application, and we're going to be able to get access to that data and make changes to it or whatever. So at any point in time when we're working with Redux and we ever use the word data, like data inside of my application, we need to be thinking about reducers. Okay, reducers produce our application state, and our application state is what holds all of our data for our app. Okay, like our state is our app's data. So inside of our application state, we will have a list of libraries, and because our reducers produce our application, it makes sense that our reducer must produce this list of libraries to show to the user. So I'm over here right now inside of the reducers index.js file, where we had hard-coded just a very simple reducer for right now, about as simple as it gets. Remember, a reducer is a function that returns some amount of data. So here's our reducer right here. And right now it's returning an empty array. So just empty array, no libraries right now. So what I'm suggesting here, what I'm trying to say is that this array right here shouldn't be empty. It should be like a list of libraries to show to the user. So whenever this reducer runs, it will return a list of libraries to show to the user. That's like the goal here. That's our plan. Now this is kind of getting to the topic of reducer design, or kind of like what different reducers we're going to have in our application. So before we just kind of willy-nilly throw a list of libraries in here, I just want to have a quick discussion about the different types of reducers that we might have in the application that we're building right now. And we're going to walk through the process of how we decide what reducers to make. In the future, we will repeat this process over and over again of kind of deciding what reducers we want to have. So for this first time, we'll walk through it nice and slow. So here's the mock-up for our application, right? We're looking at it here, and I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you, what are all the different kind of variables that I would have in this application, right? What are the different, the real question I want to ask here is, what are the different pieces of state that I would have in this application? But I don't want to really use the word state. I want to say, what are the different variables? What are the different pieces of data that I'm going to have for this application? We have a list of libraries and then a currently selected library, right? That's kind of how this application works. So I'm going to suggest that really we have two separate pieces of state inside this reducer. We have a list of libraries to show to the user, right? That's one distinct piece of state. And then we also have a separate piece of state, which is the currently selected library. So like the most recent one that the user tapped, the one that the user tapped to select, and that's the one that we want to expand and show with more detail to the user. So for this application, I'm going to suggest that we have exactly two pieces of state. Again, list of libraries, currently selected library. Because I have two pieces of state, I will suggest that we make two separate reducers. And we'll call, maybe one of them we'll call like library reducer, and then we'll call the other one maybe something like selection reducer. The library reducer will be responsible for producing our list of libraries to show to the user. So it'll be an array of maybe objects where each object represents a distinct library to show to the user. It will have properties like ID, so like the ID of the library, the name of the library, and I don't show it here in this text because it would have been really long, but it should probably also have the description of the library as well. So like, the text to show that further describes that library. Then on this second reducer that I'm going to suggest that we might call it the selection reducer, and you can see in here that I just had this very simple value for it of 1. So what is this right here? Well, for this selection reducer, I'm saying that we will have a reducer that just keep tracks of what the currently expanded library is to show to the user. And the way that it's going to work is it will record the ID of the library to show more detail of, or the one to expand. So right now the selection reducer has a piece of state of 1, or like a value of 1. That means the user wants to expand and see more detail about the library with ID 1, which is the React library. So that is how we're going to kind of piece together the state inside this application. We're going to have a library reducer and a selection reducer. The library reducer produces the list of libraries to show the user. Selection reducer keeps track of the current library that should be expanded to show more detail. Okay, so that's it. That's the goal here. Whew, a lot of talking. So let's take a quick break, and in the next section we will start implementing our library reducer.